I want to first say welcome to Manchester. It's been a great journey for Kraken being in Manchester and being part of a lot of innovation here. And over the past few months, I've been inviting a number of you to come to this launch day. And that was before we even had the idea for Mercury. And I would often say, don't come for the weather, proof in case. Come for the good food, music, football, though that's not going so well, but come for the technology. And when I knew I had to do this talk, I was trying to figure out what else do I tell you guys about Manchester. So I went to the AI gods and goddesses and said, tell me what you know about Manchester, innovation, and transformation. And a few things came up. First one was the Industrial Revolution. It was one of the places where Industrial Revolution really kicked off at speed, cotton processing improved, and textiles flew out of Manchester. When that happened, Manchester is landlocked. There are no ports. Ports are in Liverpool and London. And they're quite studious here, so they built the canal system, effectively building an inland port to transport all the textiles to far afield. Manchester also led in many human rights initiatives. It was one of the major centers for the suffragette movement in the United Kingdom for women's right to vote. Something really close to my heart is Manchester Baby. Have you guys heard of that? It's actually the first program-stored computer. There's a replica of it just down the road at the Museum of Science and Industry. It is the size of this, but it was a first. Another first was graphene was actually invented in Manchester in the building right across, which is 40 times harder than diamond. And there's a startup next door that's using graphene for a new cement that's lower carbon. But interestingly, it's a center for arts and culture. We designed this building after the club called Hacienda. And I'm looking at the smiles. That gives away your age, guys. The disco ball is the hint. But also it's been home to many artists. Oasis, Chemical Brothers, many other your favorites. Also, graphic arts. You can't see it just behind me, but the graffiti on the big wall back there and back here is again a local artist. So there has been a lot of innovation in Manchester. And the last one that got me really, really happy was apparently Manchester is seen as a green urban development center. And allegedly, it got kicked off at the Northern Quarter. Now, I took full credit for that because that's where Upside Energy that became Kraken was kicked off about 8 years ago too. But a little bit of background story. So this is a photo, New York City, 1900 Easter Day Parade. All you can see are horse-pulled carts. In fact, any of you who've been to New York and you got to see any of the brownstone buildings in sort of Midtown area, you notice one thing, which is the ground floor is actually slightly raised. And the whole reason was this, because when you have so many horses in the streets, you have horse manure everywhere. So the houses were raised that you couldn't see it. But if you ask people on those horses, riding those horses, what would you like better? The answer probably would have been a faster horse. There's one interesting thing. There's actually a car in the parade in 1900. Everybody must have thought, what an idiot. It needs fuel. Where do you fill a car in those days? It breaks down, needs to be maintained, it costs. Why not have a horse that you give a bale of hay, it's happy, and it procreates, makes more horses for you. That was the mentality. Then came a disruptor, Ford. And there are many things about Henry Ford, but he was a genius when it came to transforming transportation at the turn of the century. And he did a few changes. First, he didn't invent the conveyor belt, but improved it so much that they can take cars out in minutes, in 92 minutes from 12 hours. That's a massive improvement. Second thing that he realized, that if you keep your employees happy, they stay, they get upskilled, they do their job better. He doubled the average pay, and he wasn't known for his altruism. There was actually a clear commercial objective. And finally, he standardized everything. In 1900, you custom ordered your car. You wanted wheels, engine, seats in a different way. If you wanted a Ford T model, you got a black car, same as everybody else. And he marketed that for the first time. He said, the car that went from New York to Seattle and won the race is the same as yours. Started to promote that uniformity was a good thing. And that helped one thing. It dropped the prices dramatically in a short amount of time. Ford's vision in 1900 was to democratize the automotive industry. And he knew the way to do that was make it cheap enough that masses could buy. The other thing he did was actually, interestingly, he lobbied to build roads. And 13 years later, same street, Easter parade, no more horses. I think we are today at a very similar inflection point. In 2023, consumers spent $184 billion on low-carbon consumer technologies, EVs, heat pumps, batteries, rooftop solar. That's a big number. But you know what's really big? They outspent governments by 2 times. It shows how the power of change in our industry is changing. It doesn't need big decision-making to decide where to build a big power plant. We are doing, you guys are enabling that. In Norway, recently, 94% of the new cars sold were pure electric. Now you're going to say, small country, rich, cheap electricity. All of that is right. But you know what? China, 40% of the cars sold last month were pure electric. And it's the same trend. You can buy an EV in China for less than $10,000. Australia, 40% of roofs have rooftop solar. And these aren't, I mean, if you look carefully, this is actually a real street from Australia. They're massive. You probably have a megawatt of installed capacity in that photo. Major change in the way the system runs. Last month, half the rooftop solar installations in California had a battery attached. Resilience, independence, increased reliability. We couldn't have had this conversation a few years ago. And I think we're just at that inflection point where things are starting to change. And if you believe Bloomberg, which I do, there's going to be 200 million of these. But I'm going to caveat that. They've got it wrong. There's going to be a lot more. And even the brightest, every time they forecast how much solar we're going to have, how much wind we're going to have, how many cars, they get it wrong. They underestimate it. In 1980, a set of German utilities took a full-page ad in a broadsheet and said, we believe that energies from hydro, solar, and wind will plateau at 4% of the generation mix. Germany last year exceeded 50% renewables. Another one, amazing group of Norwegian academics in 2017 got together and wrote an analysis of renewable energy and said, in the next decade, solar and wind will plateau at 1.7 terawatts. Last year, we exceeded 2 terawatts, and we're adding 500 gigawatts every year. All good news. Sometimes predictions going wrong is a good thing. And a lot of you are causing this change. There is this incredible proliferation of incredible new technologies that consumers want to have. That's driving that. But that comes with a tax. This was the load profile on the grid ever since Tesla and Edison invented the modern grid. Low overnight. As we woke up, industry came online. It went and plateaued. And in the evening, we went home and created a little peak. It was the same. It went up a little over time. Recently, it came down, but roughly that was the shape. Then we added that rooftop solar, like in Australia and California, and created that dip in the middle of the day, which I think Californians coined the term the duck curve. That rapid rise from the new low in the middle of the day to the evening peak. During a time when we were decommissioning gas, which would have been what we'd switch on to catch up with load. We're electrifying heating and cooling. We create that little camel's humps in the morning when we wake up and we go home in the evening, making that massive rise from the duck curve even more higher and harder to meet. And we're just starting to electrify transportation and building that massive giraffe's neck on top of the existing peak and the other load from heating or cooling. This becomes an unmanageable problem. There isn't enough money or engineering to build the grid to carry this kind of a load profile. So we have to start doing things a little differently. But we think consumer devices is actually the solution because they're intelligent and there are ways of connecting to them. But today, only 5% of eligible consumer devices participate in supporting the grid. There's something seriously wrong with that, and I was talking with Arshad, who will be on stage later on, and he said, you're optimistic, it's probably more like 1%. That's a massive opportunity loss. And our duty as this group is to flip that chart around and make consumer flexibility the thing, not something that we do on the side because we're geeky or early adopters. To be able to do that, we have to fix this communication problem. How do we talk to devices? What can or cannot they do? How do they behave to support the grid in a meaningful way? Now, those of you from the UK know what this is. Everybody knows what this is. We love this. It's an incredible socket structure. It's solid. Whatever you plug in stays in. It's earthed. It's brilliant. Unless you're Alexander, who came from Belgium today and forgot his adapter. Because I have a massive collection of these. Now, it's a small thing, not a massive nuisance, but it's an opportunity missed to have created a single way of plugging things into the wall. It would have been simpler. These guys, however, figured it out extremely well. Who doesn't know what this logo is? Good, because you probably all have something in your person right now that has that logo. Do you know what the name was? I've researched this a little bit. It's quite interesting. It was named after a Swedish king, Harald Bluetooth Gromson, who apparently brought the Danish and Norwegian Viking clans together through communication to unify them. So he's a communicator. That was the inspiration. And it's not a surprise because Ericsson was the institution where Bluetooth was born or instigated. And this chap, his name I'm going to quickly look, Jaap Hartsen, in 1994, was commissioned to say, go and figure this out. Design a standard where devices can talk to each other. And it was the gentleman on the left, Niels Rybeck, who had started it. And by 1998, they had recruited IBM, Intel, Toshiba, and Nokia to work along with them to create the first version of Bluetooth. Now, I tried using Bluetooth then. It was crap. I would spend hours trying to get anything on my mobile to the laptop and back. But if we had stopped at that point, we would have failed. We would not gotten to where we are today. Today, this day, there'll be 10 million devices sold in the world with a Bluetooth logo on it. Those devices will be able to communicate with each other without worrying about what the make or model is on the other side. It's got 32,000 members across industries. They simply make things work or make things make good sound. It allows manufacturers to focus on what they're really good at. And when you manufacture things that are good and work, it creates happier customers. And that's been one of our challenges, to build that trust and enjoyment factor that things they buy from us work and deliver the value they could potentially capture from the grid. That's why Mercury. We chose a similar story. We named it after the Roman god of communication and commerce. And if you dig into it, thieves and all that, but we're not going to talk about that part. We are a collaboration of utilities, what I call the demand side for this, manufacturers, the supply side, technology providers, and regulators and associations coming together to do a number of very discrete things. We're going to develop a certification methodology. So devices that pass the Mercury test will get the Mercury logo exactly like Bluetooth. To be able to reach that, we're going to develop a set of technical guidelines to define two things. What should a hardware, a battery, a heat pump, an EV charger, inverter be able to do, and how quickly to support what the grid or a utility or a trader or an aggregator needs it to do. And then we're going to look at what is the right way to communicate with that device to exploit those functional capabilities to achieve the value for the whole system, because consumer flexibility is the cheapest form of flexibility we can create. What we will not do, and I got this question asked many times, we're not going to go and write standards. There are many standards out there that perform a lot of what we need. But what we will do is probably put some guidelines and say, if you are implementing OCPP, we'd like you to implement it in this way, and these are the tests that you need to pass. So that way, we're taking the existing infrastructure and making sure it works to the standards that the utilities want it to do. And believe it or not, we've started this 8 weeks ago. Those of you who may know Greg Jackson knows that he has a following, and he decided 8 weeks ago at an event in Berlin to get on stage and announce. And I was terrified because I didn't know what was going to come. But you guys all came, and it's been an incredible journey. Our founding members today include, and I'm not going to go one by one, many of you are here in the room, these utilities. And we're careful to cover geographic presence, so North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, functional as well, integrated utilities, retailers, network operators, to cover the full spectrum. Then we said to manufacturers from EV charging, heat pumps, batteries, inverters, come. And there are a few more that are actually in the process of joining this. Then Kraken, this is not Kraken. We just instigated this to bring everyone together. So we brought others along with us, Oracle, Lunar, SolarEdge, AWS, and there are a few more on their way to join the list. And EPRI, I'm eternally grateful for supporting us and making this such a success, will become the manager of this process, and we'll probably have other associations join as well. So to close it off, it took 13 years for New York to get rid of horse carts. We together here have an incredible opportunity to lay the foundation to build streets full of electric vehicles, to have homes that don't create a problem for the grid, support it, creating an overall value and sharing with those with your consumers. So once again, thank you for coming to Manchester.